we're calling the whole project Exploring Medieval Seals, a case study in research and outreach. It is in fact 2 projects, as Elizabeth will explain. And our approach this afternoon is something that will be familiar to the archivists among you in particular. As I'm sure all of you know, archivists and researchers, seals were used for validating formal documents for many centuries and are still used today in appropriate circumstances. So we decided to outline our 2 projects by using the methods of diplomatic analysis, which go back to ancient times. If people wanted to understand the nature and purpose of a document, they asked certain questions. And so we're going to ask those questions, and that will enable us to cover a lot of information through those simple questions and not waste words. So the questions that we're going to ask are who, what, how, with whose assistance, think of partnerships there, why, where, and when. And so you'll see the key words popping up in the top corner of the slides as we go along, and that'll help us to move through what is the description of very, very complex research work and data gathering in particular. And then we come to a codicil at the end, which of course is a common diplomatic element in wills, but that enables us to draw the conclusions very quickly and point out the issues and what we learnt from the experience. Elizabeth.
Thank you. Yeah, starting off with the what. As Susan mentioned, there are actually 2 projects involved here. The first one is the Arts and Humanities Research Council funded Seals in Medieval Wales project. A little bit of a misnomer because we, from the outset and in fact in the application, we said that we would look at the English Marcher counties as well, but it was a bit of a mouthful to call it all that. It was a 3-year standard grant, so on these large research grants, based at Aberystwyth University in collaboration with Bangor University, aimed to gather a large amount of new data, but also to ask hard research questions. It was very much viewed as a university research project. However, because of the data gathering element, the fact that we needed a large amount of new archival material, at the very earliest stage when we were thinking about making an application for such a project, we brought in archive expertise and started to talk to various repositories. We recorded a large amount of data, approximately just over under 3,500 seal impressions from slightly over 2,500 separate seals. We were then successful in obtaining follow-on funding, again from the AHRC. Oh, and incidentally, we held an exhibition. So we built in just a minor thing. We had a major public exhibition at the National Library of Wales that ran from April to September last year, and we produced an associated publication. I have one extra copy with me for anyone who's terribly excited by this. If not, you can get hold of it through the department. And there are some postcards about our follow-on funding project, which, as I say, we obtained again through the AHRC, principally for outreach and public engagement. So the themes that are running through here. And that has come in 2 strands: public talks and if you could, incidentally, there are some Welsh ones floating around. So if you look at a postcard and think, I can't read any of it, you've probably got the Welsh version. Apologies to the Welsh speakers here who will hopefully look at those. So the follow-on funding project is all about outreach and engagement, and has included public talks, local and history societies, interest groups, but also a series of professional development workshops, principally hosted by archives for heritage practitioners of all sorts. And we have funding till the end of January next year. So if anyone is interested in hosting such an event, combined CPD and public talks, then do get in touch.
Now the next question is who was involved? Well, the project was led by Professor Philip Schofield, and you can see his credentials there. A well-established and distinguished professor of medieval history. Elizabeth was already on the scene at the time when we were planning the project, as was I. And then Dr. John McEwen was appointed to the project, and we have Dr. Susan Johns from Bangor. Now, all have relevant interests, and it's proved a remarkably smooth and efficient team. And you'll see that we've noted under John's credentials there that he is in fact an IT wizard. So apart from his medieval history credentials, the IT wizardry was also absolutely vital for the data gathering and the huge database that we needed. So there we have the people. Now, in addition to those individuals who were involved from the start, and actually the writing of the bid was one of the last things I did before retirement, which is why some of you will be surprised to see me here today, because I've continued with the project thereafter. We also have a knowledge transfer advisory board for both projects, and it has remained the same for both projects. And those of you who know some of the names up there may appreciate the logic. Now, I came in as the archive knowledge because I've spent my career training archivists and in external advisory work on the archive side. So that was my input to the project from the planning stage. Professor Paul Harvey, who has been both an archivist and a very distinguished historian, and is one of our acknowledged experts on seals in Western Europe as well as in Britain. And then Professor Mark Ormrod from York, who's very experienced on projects of this kind and very interested in the subject matter also. And that has proved a very effective and very valuable addition to the project.
Now, I realise I perhaps preempted this a little with the... so we're back to what, again, but a little bit more about the principal project, Seals in Medieval Wales. As you can see from that, there was extensive data gathering. We visited 9 different repositories. The logistical side is something that can't be underestimated, the pre-planning that had to be done, the negotiations, the fact that as researchers we just wanted to get in and go through the material, but the archives saying, well, actually we're already completely full and we have very few staff, and negotiating between those two the sides and coming to a mutually beneficial arrangement. The other thing we did is we recorded everything within a collection that was within the temporal and geographical parameters. We did not cherry pick. And so often previous studies of seals have cherry picked either certain collections or certain types of seal or seal user. We didn't, and that has given us very different results from a lot of previous projects. How? Well, we were dealing with large amounts of data. 2 researchers, myself and John McEwen, going into these 9 different repositories. We had to have a large relational database. John, my colleague, thankfully is very good at IT, as Susan said. He programmed this relational database, which has 260-something fields across 5 major tables, just to give you an idea of the sort of data. We simply would not have been able to do the amount of data recording or the analysis that we have and are doing without the IT side. We also built on the methodology pioneered principally by Paul Harvey with the Duchy of Lancaster collections in TNA and current international best practice, but we then had to adapt that because we were recording information from the parent document. We were only looking impressions still attached to those, but that also meant we had the greater context. And, for example, making sure that we put in location identifiers. Digital photography has revolutionised many research projects in the humanities in recent years, and ours is no exception. One of the negotiations that we had to undertake with repositories was permission to photograph everything, and the logistics of that, using a camera stand and lighting, and the conservation issues that had to be borne in mind. But this was absolutely essential with the amount of material from so many different collections. And now for the interpretive work, again, this is absolutely invaluable. And I cannot stress too much how important this visual material is for a project of our sort. And what we're hoping now is that as we go through into the period of making this accessible, that all the repositories will, as most of them have already indicated, be willing for the material to be made available online in some form, whether it's through the repository or it's through our website or in some other way, because this is so important. Also, you can talk to people about seals and they'll just sit there going, oh yes. You show them pictures and they go, oh, that's interesting. Oh, look at the bird on that. And you can see how that can work from everyone from, and I've done this, from 7-year-olds upwards. These objects are physical and visual. They are not two-dimensional. And on that subject, what we also did, and again this is modern technologies that have enabled us to do this, we established a hierarchical keyword framework so that the motif, and this is using the Panofskian natural definitions, so the 13 men eating dinner rather than the Last Supper. You say what you could actually see rather than the cultural interpretation on top. Using those to tag the images, so we've embedded these keywords in metadata for the images as well as in the database. The searching potential, the research potential, not for us but for anyone who's interested in this material, is vast. And then with whose assistance? I keep saying negotiations, discussions, workshops. This is absolutely essential. This project would not have, I doubt it would have got the funding. We certainly would not have been able to operate in the way we did without the support of the repositories that we visited. Yes, we're university based, but we spent 18 months in effect in archives, and establishing good relationships on a personal basis, on an institutional basis, understanding that just because we wanted something didn't mean that the repository could just drop everything and give it to us, that there was give and take on both sides and that there was mutual understanding. And we did not have a formal partnership with the National Library of Wales for a number of reasons, but we had a very close working relationship with them. And the exhibition that we held was at the library. So although the project team curated that exhibition, it was within the National Library, within the Hengurt Gallery, one of their controlled galleries in the library, and we worked very, very closely with the exhibitions team there. So absolutely close, as close a collaboration as you can get between university-based and archival or heritage-based individuals and institutions. It helps that the university is literally 5 minutes from the National Library as well. But yes, thank you. Why? These projects were designed to show the potential of this material for studies of a whole range of social, cultural, political, religious, economic questions. But they do feed into local and family history. We had a group of school children in while the exhibition was on who got very excited about, well, what would they put on their seal? Because seals are very much about identity, so fits within national curriculum, key stages, as well as research questions at various levels. And when? Well, the projects themselves ran 2009 till last summer, and our current project, as I say, runs until the end of January next year, so there is still the opportunity for a little bit more. And it's building on past experience and current enthusiasm, not just within Britain, but not just within Europe, but actually internationally. Seal studies have had a great renaissance, and people are suddenly realising they're not peripheral, they're not just for art historians, that they actually have huge potential for a whole range of historical questions. And finally, in the best tradition of wills, where you think you've said everything and then you forget and you have to add the really important bit at the end, the codicil.
The codicil, yes. And the codicil, in this case, reminds you of the essential emphasis on collaboration and mutual understanding of the perspectives of those who hold collections and those who want to do the research. And without that, you really cannot make progress. There's the planning that has to be done, the sharing of expertise, because the sum of the whole is much greater than the two separate groupings. We have to understand professional values. And this is when one is likely to achieve the greatest impact with knowledge transfer and public engagement. Now, the work embodied in these projects could not have succeeded without these particular elements. Researchers need to seek archival expertise early in the planning process, and I can't overemphasize that. It's already been mentioned today. It should come into the initial planning, not be an add-on at a later stage. The advanced planning is vital so that the logistics can work. We need to understand about conservation, preservation, good handling practices, and why archivists work as they do, as well as why researchers work as they do. Knowledge transfer, public engagement, impact, and outreach associated with this project has been particularly strong. We've been helped by working through CYMAL, that's Museums, Archives and Libraries Wales, who have existing professional networks, and through those networks they spread the word about this project, and we had plenty of responses then about repositories who wanted to hold these events and what could we do for them, etc. So that has proved invaluable to the actual securing of the success of the outreach, which is, it's one thing to say you're going to do it, it's quite another thing to actually make sure that you do it. So that has worked, but in fact it's operating right across the UK at all levels, from medieval festivals through to high-level conferences and conference papers. And I'm on the last word here to say that the constituencies are very interesting, because we have archivists, we have curators, museum curators, who have a lot of seal matrices. We've got a new constituency, and those are the finds recorders for the Portable Antiquities Scheme, who are at a bit of a loss as to how to describe these objects. So there are many, many groups that really need to know more about this, and of course how seals can be used as a learning resource. And finally, and this harks back to something that was mentioned this morning also, different recording methods, systems and databases, all in electronic form, are rapidly creating difficulties in connecting communities. Do you get the message? It's very difficult to search across the relevant electronic sources to find all the information you need. So this is a challenge for the IT wizards in the next couple of years.